Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. I am Libbie and I am back today with another law Q&A for you guys. So I did a law Q&A at the end of first year, which I will link down below, but I'm now a second year law student at the University of Exeter, so I thought I would do an updated Q&A and I popped it on my Instagram story, so be sure to follow me on Instagram if you don't already, because that's a good way to get in touch with me as well, and I quite often do like polls and stuff on there. So these questions have some more of like a second year focus as well as sort of like the first year and all of that. So I'm going to be answering all of your questions today. So let's get started. So the first question that I got was, how many hours of work did you do in first year? So I'll give you like a rough overview of how many hours of work I did in first year and how many hours of work I did in second year. I actually answered this really specifically after first year in my first Q&A, so go to that video if you want to see a more elaborate view of how many like pages of reading and everything I did, and it's all timestamped in the caption. Find it really hard to say, but probably on average, I think I said in my last Q&A like 3 to 4 hours a day, but I would say that that's like the extra reading on top of any sort of seminars and syndicates I had as well. So a little bit more than that when you account for like the actual classes that you have to go to. And then bear in mind that I didn't have a job until second term when I was in first year, so I felt like I had actually quite a lot of free time on my hands in first year. Like I did feel quite overwhelmed by the reading, especially at the beginning of the year. But when I got more into the swing of it, like in first term, towards the end of first term, and I think also because we didn't have any exams in Christmas, they were all at the end of the year, like there was nothing to be stressed over Christmas, which was really nice. And then this year is a whole nother story. I would say I'd probably on average put in about 7 or 8 hours of actual work a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Yeah, I think that's probably about right. Like obviously I do less on some days, and sometimes I end up taking like a day out in the middle of the week and then working on the weekends, like working on Saturday and Sunday. But I would say I really do work like a full-time job now. I'm in second year, but you also have to factor in that I have my 180 sort of role that I spend a few hours a week on. And then I'm also on the law review, so that's going to take up some of my time. Also YouTube, so like even when I finish work, when I'm at uni, in the evenings I'm usually still like editing or doing other stuff as well, but it's just like less mentally taxing work. And also now it's application season, so I'm also applying for vacation schemes, which in itself is like a lot of hours of work, so that also sort of goes into the fact that I'm working like full days for like probably like 5 to 6 days of the week. Yeah, so it's not necessarily all of the course. I feel like the course has got a bit harder, but you'd expect it to in second year. But because there's so many other things that I have to do as well, I spend a lot of time working. Yeah. So I definitely in second year am working at like a full-time job, probably more hours than a full-time job, when you factor in everything else that I do, not just the course. I have spent so long talking about that, I hope that wasn't too convoluted. So the next questions I think link quite well to this. So I've had quite a few questions about how do you organise your time, and how do you manage your time with everything being online. So I organise my time very, very much by to-do lists, and I have a diary. So I have a week to view diary with the week on one side and sort of like notes on the other side and a to-do list. So I have at any one time 2 to 3 to-do lists on the go. So I'll have like a massive to-do list in my big A4 notebook of like all the stuff that needs to get done in the sort of week or so, and things that I know need to get done, whether that's reading, whether it's like a test that I need to do, all of those sorts of things will get written on the big to-do list. And then every single day I will look at my big to-do list and cross-reference that with whatever classes I have, like seminars I have coming up, when things are due, and then I will write out daily to-do list in my smaller notepad so I can see what I need to get done for that day. And also, if I know that this isn't something that I'm gonna finish today, I will quite often only allow myself an hour or 2 hours to work on it. Like, I'll give myself a set amount of time to work on it, and once I've completed that amount of time, then I can highlight it off my to-do list as done, so I feel like I've actually achieved something, rather than not actually getting to the end of it and not being able to tick anything off the to-do list, if you know what I mean. So to-do lists are a massive thing for me. Also, planning out all of my seminars and due dates and writing them all into my diary, and writing in exams and knowing what my assessments are a big way that I stay organised and know what I'm working towards. I like organise and manage my time. It's basically with my to-do list, so a lot of things will be like, do this week's reading, so that will take however long, and then if it's, for example, like spend an hour on an application, spend an hour writing this essay, then that's how I will organise it in my daily to-do list. But yeah, just setting myself daily and weekly goals are the main sort of things I do to organise myself, and knowing when my assessments are, writing them all into my diary, knowing when my seminars are, that sort of thing. So another question that I've got is, how do you stay motivated? I've had this quite a few times. This is a really hard one because I think I know I'm like a very driven person, so I'm very much sort of like, I know what I feel like I'm working towards something, so that in itself motivates me, and I'm really goals driven. So even if I wasn't doing this, like in lockdown, I've set myself so many goals. That's sort of like, I am quite driven, so I feel like motivation, because I know what I'm working towards, comes with that. But also, obviously, like, I would be lying if I told you I didn't have unmotivated days. Like, I completely do. If you watch some of my vlogs, I have days where I'm having a bit of a wobble. I think with everything that's going on in the world particularly, I would never forgive myself if I didn't do as well as I could in my degree. Those are all big motivators for me. So yeah, I don't know if I could give any like specific tips for motivation, other than sort of like similar to what I've said, like setting yourself goals, knowing what you're working towards, that sort of thing. But yeah, I would also say, like, if you don't feel motivated, absolutely don't feel bad about it at all, because we all have unmotivated days. No one can blame you for feeling unmotivated in the current climate that we're living in. Sometimes it's just about getting what you can done. So if that's 1 week's worth of reading, if it's a few pages worth of reading, yeah, I think sometimes it's just about doing what you can, and I certainly have days like that. Despite how sort of stressful it can be, despite how many deadlines you can have and all of that, at the heart of it, I actually do enjoy the content. Like, I do find it really interesting, and I like a challenge. So yeah, that's another one of the reasons that I stay motivated. But I'm not always motivated, no one is, and it's fine if you're not feeling motivated. Just do what you can. So someone has asked me if there are any A-levels that are comparable to law as a degree, and I would say, obviously, because I did English Lit, biology and theatre, I'm not really sure because I haven't done all of them, but I know when I did constitutional law, there was like a fair amount of sort of like politicsy stuff in there, and I did feel like I had to teach myself some of the basics of like how our government sort of functions, which you might learn in politics. Also, law A-level, I would imagine you learn some of the foundational stuff. But tutors have said to us before that they teach it so differently at A-level than they do at university for law, that they prefer it if you haven't done law A-level. I'm sure it's fine either way. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say any A-levels are that comparable to it. I would say English literature has probably helped me because I've developed essay writing skills through English literature, and I really enjoy writing the essays for law, so that's a bit helpful as well. I would say there are definitely sort of like transferable things from different A-levels, but none of them necessarily that comparable to the degree. So someone has asked me about my note-taking method. I made a whole video on how to take like first-class law notes, which is basically like just some of my advice and things that I do to take good notes, which I will also link down below for you. And I've also been asked how I use journal and article readings precisely in my answers. So this is probably quite a hard one to answer, but basically if I'm using a journal article in an essay, I generally will have read it quite in depth, copied and pasted any quotes that I think are quite useful or important, and popped them into another document for the essay. The main thing you want to get with like scholars' articles is what their main point is. So I'll always read the intro and the conclusion first, then read the headings to see how they're arguing it, but I also like to read really in depth, so I really understand the topic by reading in depth into the articles. So not only do I get their main point, but I'll like really understand everything that they're talking about and that whole area of law, because obviously they're explaining it through the article. But yeah, the main sort of things that you want to take from a journal article is the main point of the article. So in your essay you can literally be like, this scholar has argued this or like proposed this, and then you sort of engage with it and say like what you think about it. You respond to it, you contrast it with other scholars' views, and yeah, basically sort of analyse it, say if it's convincing, say to what extent you think it's convincing, that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's basically how I use journal articles. I've also done how to write a first class essay as a video where I talk a little bit about that as well, so we'll also link that down below so you can check that out if you want to. So someone has asked me what skills I think are important when studying law. So I think basically like critical analysis, resilience because it's a lot of work, organisation, yeah, that sort of thing. They're probably the main sort of skills I'd pick out off the top of my head. So someone has asked me, how do you deal with all the reading, as I end up spending hours making notes? So do I. I think a lot of people do. Like, the reading takes a really long time. I think it takes longer than tutors think it takes you. Either that or we're spending too long doing it. But I get this message a lot, like people are struggling with the readings and stuff. I don't always have time to do all the reading. Sometimes I will do some articles, perhaps I will leave them for revision. But yeah, I always do all the textbook reading. To save time, basically all I do is I just make sure that I've watched my lectures first, and then I'll make my textbook notes around the lecture notes, because if they've spoken about it in the lecture, I'll just like really briefly skim over it and add any bits afterwards. Also, you just have to get better at like knowing what's important and not what's not important, and also sort of reading and thinking, would I actually get asked about this? How relevant is this? That sort of thing. But yeah, I'm guilty of spending a really long time doing the reading and making quite extensive notes where perhaps I might not need to. And I think you very much learn what's useful for you and what's not useful for you. So if you're spending a long time doing the reading but you think it's important and you think it's helpful, then I mean, you should probably carry on doing it. Again, you might want to watch my how I make notes videos for like more on how I do like textbook reading and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people do struggle with the amount of reading we get, and eventually you sort of get faster and know what's important and what's not important, and know what you have to do and what you don't necessarily have to spend as long on. So the next question is, did you do any first year schemes or like insight days? And I really stupidly, like, I didn't really have any sort of like knowledge of law firms. I didn't really necessarily know what I wanted to do when I came in at first year. Like, I'd never really like spoken to anyone about any of this stuff, so I didn't really know what an open day was. And then I ended up applying to like the ones that were left open the day after most of them had closed, so there were a few that like closed a day later for applications. So I didn't really know much about the firms or anything at this point. Yeah, so basically like I didn't do very well. Like, obviously I'm a lot more on track and I know what I'm doing more now, but I didn't really know much about it in first year, didn't really have much guidance. So yeah, I did that. I think I got accepted. I can't really remember which ones I applied to, but I think I got accepted to do one for Bristow's, but it got cancelled, and then I ended up doing an online Clyde & Co one. But that was all I did. So I have a couple of questions also about like what am I planning to do later on in my career, like what type of law firms, practice areas you're applying to, what are your plans for the future, career, further studies. So I'm applying to vacation schemes now, so ideally I want to work as a solicitor in commercial law in a city firm. So yeah, that's what I'm aiming towards now. So someone has also asked me, how do you structure a non-problem question from start to finish? So I'm assuming you mean like an essay question. Have a look at the video I did about writing a first class essay, because I do speak about structure and stuff in there. I also want to do a video on how I write an essay from start to finish. Like, that's definitely very much like, I definitely want to do that soon. Let me know if that's something that you would like to see. I'll do like structure and how I plan it and how I write an essay start to finish in that video. Someone has asked me, how hard is law school? So that is a very tough question, because how long is a piece of string? It is quite tough sometimes. Like, I definitely was quite stressed revising. Like, I did find some of the content quite challenging. Second year is a bit harder, but like I've said, that's because of my increased workload. I think it really depends on you as a person, like if you like it, if you don't like it that much. how much work you're willing to put in and all of that. So yeah, very subjective. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's easy. It's definitely not easy. So what is the LPC? That's the legal practice course, which is like another year of study you do after your qualifying law degree. Be able to then go on to do your training contract to qualify as a solicitor. So someone has also asked me, like, how do you organise time and make sure you keep on track with all of the subjects? Obviously I spoke about organising my time a little bit earlier on. Spoke about that for quite a long time, but keep making sure I keep on track with all the subjects. One thing that I do like to do is like print it all out and print all the reading lists out for all of the weeks together, so I can like see exactly what I've done and what I've got to do for next week and that sort of thing. And also at the bottom of my diary I'll write out the 4 modules that I'm currently doing, and then put like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then tick when I've done all of the work for each one, so I can visually see where I'm at for each module. And that really helps me, so I know that I've completed all of the work for 1 week for that module when I've ticked it off. So someone has asked me what your biggest tips are for getting a first. So I definitely did better in essay questions, just having like good revision techniques, especially because it's open note now, like just making sure you've read the articles and summarised them if you're going to answer essay questions, making sure if you don't understand how like a legal issue works for a problem question, make sure you ask before the exam and things like that so that you're not caught out. So yeah, just like revise quite hard, make sure your notes are in order for your exam, make sure that you do the extra reading, because extra reading I find is so good for like understanding and different ways of analysing things. I think, yeah, again, it really depends on the person. Like it depends. I think a lot of people prefer problem questions. So if you're going to choose to answer more problem questions, obviously work really hard on answering problem questions and getting feedback on that and things like that. Revise early, start early. So I really like Law Express books, like I find them really helpful for summarising stuff, because sometimes you can get like a bit of an information overload and they really highlight some of the really key bits in those books. Also listen to your lecturers, and like if you have like a study skills zone, if there's like a part of something that you're struggling with, like if you don't know how to structure essays, they may well have like uploaded a video or like a lecture on how to write essays. And I have also got a question about answering problem questions, to make sure that you identify all of the legal issues and apply all the legal reasoning and just work through the issues methodically. You can break it down by sort of like person and discuss each person's liability in the problem question, or you can literally just work through the issues sort of depending on what seems right. So the last problem question that I've done for a formative, I just worked my way through the legal issues like through the problem question. But yeah, just make sure you're really familiar with all the sort of like legal issues of that area of law. Take formative opportunities, the ones that don't count towards your final grade, and get feedback. Like feedback's so helpful. So if you're not doing that well and then you can get feedback on the problem question answer that you've written, then it's going to be so helpful for the future. So that is all the questions that I'm going to answer today. If I haven't answered your question, I will message you with my response, or I will answer on my story. They're probably more specific if I haven't answered them, which is why I haven't included them. But I really hope that that has been helpful. I really hope you have enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram so you don't miss out on Q&As in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.